Hello, everyone. It's been a while since I uploaded my first video. I wanted to sort of take some time to reflect on what kinds of material I wanted to upload. Um, and it struck me that, I did sort of enjoy doing the last video, but um, I thought it might be more fun for me and for all of you to share with you guys some of the more creative stuff that I'm doing. So the last video was related to my dissertation, and right now that is sort of a frustrating thing for me. Like I really want to have that finished, and just I feel sort of like I'm stuck where I'm at until I can get the dissertation done. Um, and that's not really a good feeling. It's not something that I'm especially enjoying right now. So I thought, why would I want to upload videos about something that, I mean, I have to work on it, of course, but that I'm not really enjoying. I would rather upload videos about the things that are exciting me. And what's exciting me at the moment is a particular creative undertaking that I've begun actually this past week. And so I wanted to speak with you a little bit about that. And I think that's what I want to feature in this upcoming set of videos. So I'll explain to you a little bit about the creative musical project that I have kind of begun. And then at the end, I'll sort of summarize what some of my plans are. So this past week, I downloaded what is called a digital audio workstation, or DAW. You'll hear people refer to it as just a DAW sometimes. And this is basically a piece of software that you download to your computer that lets you work with sound in various different ways. It lets you record, it lets you use synthesizers, it lets you edit your sound. You can mix the levels of different tracks so that you get the balance, the musical balance, the way that you want it to be. And it lets you put everything together and export it as like a WAV file or an MP3 file or whatever format you want to. I think rather than try to explain all of this verbally, what I'd like to do is just show you some of how it works. So I'm going to share my screen here on Zoom. All right. So the software that I downloaded is called Cakewalk, and it is one of probably a dozen or more of these digital audio workstations that are available right now. I chose this one primarily because it's free. It's supposed to be a professional quality digital audio workstation. The industry standard for the music industry right now is Pro Tools by Adobe, I believe. I'll have to check on that. No, it's Avid, I believe. It's the same company that makes Sibelius, which is the music notation software that I use. But anyway, I chose this one because it's free and it's supposed to be, a pretty standard traditional workflow that compares, if I learn in this software, basically, I should be able to transfer those skills to other like more standard mainstream programs if I ever wanted to. So conceivably, if I learn how to use the software really well, that could be a skill set that I could use even for a career at some point in, say, music production or something like that. So I'm going to start with an empty project and just show you how it's set up. So if you start just with an empty project, you have to add whatever tracks you want. So you click here to do that. You can set it to either be an audio track, which is where you record yourself using a microphone, or an instrument track, which means a MIDI instrument. MIDI, MIDI, is an abbreviation for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And basically, this is a way of encoding the details of sound using computer code. So if I had like a keyboard, a piano keyboard hooked up to my laptop with a MIDI connector cable, then when I pressed a key on the keyboard, MIDI would encode the pitch that I played, the loudness with which I played it, so the like pressure and articulation with which I pressed the key, and it would encode the length of time that I played it for, details like that. So it basically takes those details of the sound and encodes it. And then you can take that code and play the MIDI file back using any number of different sounds that you select from. So once you have the MIDI file that has the raw data about what notes are to be played and for how long, then you can play with it and modify it in various ways. Okay, so I'm going to start by creating an audio track and just show how that works. So you get your audio track in there. You can record by pressing this to arm, what's called arm the recording, and then this input echo will allow me to hear through the microphone what it is that I am currently recording. So I'm going to turn that off right now because I can hear that I'm getting some feedback. Okay, so I'm going to record something. See how this works. La 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 la. Right? So you could hear it has a metronome built in. This 120 here means it's tapping at 120 beats per minute. That's adjustable. So if I wanted to set it to a slower or faster tempo, I could type in precisely what I wanted. This gives you the meter, so you can change the pattern at which the metronome taps are accented. In this case, it was set to 4/4, so it was accenting every fourth beat. And then there's more specific metronome settings here where you can adjust some other things. So that was the first thing. You have a metronome which helps you as you're playing or singing to time everything so that it's together. If you wanted to, for more complicated pieces, you could also, one of the things you can do with this tool is there's a way in here to, well, I found it earlier in the software. I would have to, oh yes, here it is. So you can, if you have a time signature change or tempo change, you can set what measure you want that to happen at. So if you're singing or playing music that changes meters or changes tempos, you can set it so that it does that at a certain time. So you could therefore conceivably use this software to create a click track, which is like a track that gives you the tempo and meter throughout a composition. Conductors of film scores will use that to help them like sync their conducting up to the video in the desired way. But anyway, let's play this back and hear how it recorded. La 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 la. Okay, so if I wanted to add another track now, say I wanted to record a duet with myself, then I can set that to arm it to record, and when I hit record now, it'll play back the track that I was just recording a second ago. So that'll let me figure out, it'll let me hear how what I'm currently singing or playing fits in with what's already there. La 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 la. Right, and I didn't plan any of that in advance, so it's probably going to sound really bad when I play it back. But let's see what I got. La 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 la. Yeah, so the timing was off, even with the metronome. So that's been a challenge for me. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But that gives you a sense of how you're able to use the software to record multiple tracks into the same sound file. And later on, so over here in this panel, I haven't learned how to use this yet, but this panel contains some various tools you can use, including there should be a mixer over here somewhere. So once I have those multiple tracks in there, I can adjust their relative volume, and so that the balance of the music is how I want. But that's a skill that I haven't learned yet. I've just so far been using it to try to record duets with myself on various. Well, I'll talk about what I've done specifically in a minute, but I've been learning this audio recording feature and the ability to record multiple tracks into the same file because it seemed like there's so much to learn in this software. That seemed like a reasonable place to begin because I don't have really any experience with working with MIDI with digital instruments, and so I thought it made sense to draw first upon what I do have experience with, which is playing acoustic instruments and singing acoustically. And gradually, I do hope to learn like basically all of the features that this offers. So all the things over in this panel. In this right-hand panel, there are various plugins. It comes with several of these plugins, the software does, and you can download others. These let you do things like apply effects. For example, reverb is one that I've worked with in a different program, Audacity, before. So I imagine this would let you change like the resonance of the sound so that it makes it sound as though you're in a more echoey room than you maybe recorded in the first place, and that can make your recording sound really good. I used that on an Audacity project that I did with a pianist one time, and we made it sound, we recorded it basically in practice rooms, which are tend to be pretty dead acoustic spaces, but we made it sound like we were in a concert hall using that reverb effect. So that's just an example of the kind of thing you can do with these plugins. And I haven't learned how any of this works yet in this particular software, but that's going to be part of the kind of creative journey that I am trying to go on right now. Now, I do want to show you very briefly how the MIDI works. Now, I haven't learned how to hook up a keyboard yet and use it to work with MIDI, but I've played around with it just a little bit in here. So when I start a MIDI track, there is a whole separate window that comes up for like this is the MIDI instrument setup. I haven't learned how this works either, but I assume, all of these are set to piano except for this one that says standard set. I assume that I could change that to a different instrument if I wanted. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm not necessarily concerned with changing that for the time being. What I can do though, if I want to edit what I want the MIDI to play, is I can actually pull up a piano keyboard by double clicking here, and it breaks the track up into measures, and I can tell it exactly what notes I want it to play in each measure. So suppose I wanted to do just a simple chord progression, I can actually draw that in by hand. All right, and if I play that back, because I drew each of these out to the length of one measure, it'll last 4 beats of this quarter note equals 120. So let's hear how that sounds. So it's a very simple, very basic use of this MIDI file, this MIDI technique, which, as you can imagine, could become very sophisticated. You could, there are different durations up here. I assume that means you can set it so that you're playing like half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes, triplets, dotted notes. I think these are all rhythmic controls that you can use somehow to input notes of different lengths. But those are all things that I still have to learn. I've just done some very basic experimentation with MIDI so far. So this is the software that I'm learning. And this is basically, I've shown you everything I've learned about it so far. I'm going to keep, working on it and hopefully continue to share things with you as I continue to learn them. So that's the software I've been using. I want to show you just the applications of it that I've had so far. And I've had so far a couple of sessions of recording that I've tried to use this software to create my own recordings. And I thought a good place to start for the first session would be to take what I know the best, which is the trumpet, and make something using it. I decided that I wanted to use this book. So the Arbin Complete Method for Trumpet. This is a book that I started using when I was probably in middle school. I think it was middle school when I started using this. I was taking trumpet lessons, and this is kind of a classic book for students of the trumpet or cornet. It's this guy Arbin was a cornetist, Cornet and trumpet are very similar instruments. The main difference is that a trumpet has a cylindrical bore, which gives it a little bit of a brassier sound, and the cornet has a conical bore, which gives it more of a mellow sound. But this guy, Arban, you can see his dates, 1825 to 1889. So this music is all in public domain. That's why you can just find PDFs of it online. And he was the trumpet or the cornet professor at the Paris Conservatoire, which is in Paris, the main kind of musical institution. It still is to this day, I believe, that both practicing musicians, like instrumentalists and singers, and also composers, music theorists, and everybody like that all go to study. The music education system in France was, and I think still is, much more centralized than it is, say, in the United States, where there are different conservatories, different university departments, lots of different places that people can go to learn this kind of stuff, as well as just every city has its own like private instructors of these instruments, and I'm sure that's the case in France as well. But I think the prestige of the conservatoire is a lot more concentrated than the prestige of academic instruction in music in the US. Anyway, that's kind of a digression. So this book, I'm going to scroll all the way, almost not quite to the end, but I think they're pretty close to the end. But it contains a number of duets. Here they are. So I decided these are duets that I used to play sometimes with my trumpet teacher when I was in high school. And I used to also one year for Christmas, my mom and dad gave me a Music Minus One CD. Music Minus One is where you have the sheet music in front of you. It comes with a CD recording, and in this particular one, the recording contains both the right and both the upper and the lower parts. The upper part was recorded entirely on, I think, the right speaker, so it's in stereo, but balanced so that one part is entirely on the right and the other part is entirely on the left. And then you set the equalizer on your sound system so that it only plays one part or the other, and then you can play the part that you tuned out in that way. So anyway, I've been playing, excuse me, been playing these duets for a long time and thought this would be a good place to start. Pretty simple, pretty easy to play, so that I could focus just on learning the software. So I'd like to share with you some of the results and then talk about that a little bit. So the first one I'd like to share is this Russian hymn. So I have here these recordings of my efforts. Okay, so I feel like that wasn't too bad for a first attempt. Couple things. First of all, you might have noticed that I didn't follow this forte all the time. So it just tells you forte at the beginning, which means to play loud, and it doesn't give you any other instructions. What I tried to do instead to make it just a little bit more interesting was to play forte on the first time through this first section. Then when it comes back and repeats here, play piano instead. So get soft to add variety, and then stay soft the first time through here, and then get loud um, when this section, the second section, repeats. So I think that part worked very well. A couple of issues that I encountered. First of all, intonation was a problem. Intonation is a term for like how well in tune you're playing. So, for example, when I noticed when the two parts landed on this unison C, that was pretty badly out of tune. And the unisons in particular, octaves and unisons, are where the intonation is going to be the most noticeable if it's off. And I noticed kind of throughout recording these duets that intonation was a little bit of a problem. The main reason for that, honestly, is because I'm a little bit out of shape on the trumpet. I have not been able to practice nearly as much as I used to be able to, like all through college. So it's just going to take a little bit more time and effort to get back in shape. And the way that I'll work on this is by sitting down with a tuner and just going through playing long tones, just to pick a note and play it a long time. And I'm able to make adjustments in the tuning by basically changing the shape of my mouth as I'm playing. Um, and so I watch kind of the dial on the tuner and adjust it until it matches, where it's supposed to be. So that'll get better with time, I'm quite confident. The other issue that I ran into, and I'm sure you heard, is rhythmically. The same thing that happened when I was recording, when I did the sample recording earlier in this video. The two parts get rhythmically out of sync a little bit at times. So even though, excuse me, even though there's a recorder, sorry, a metronome that is going within the recorder, um, I find it very hard to get precisely in time with myself. And I think that's because when I am performing live, I tend to base my playing off of visual cues very much, um, and off of like listening to what's going on around me. So, for example, when I was playing in brass quintet, when we would play a passage that speeds up or slows down, since I was the first trumpet player, I would have to conduct with my bell essentially, so it kind of bob up and down in the tempo, and that gives everyone the sense of how we're changing the speed of our playing in time. And even in situations where there are fewer visual cues than that, I always tend to base my playing off of the other person and listen closely to what's happening around me, because um, I tend to think it's more important that music be together if it's live music than it is to be like in a steady tempo. Playing with a metronome, therefore, has always been kind of difficult for me because if you have a steady tempo, it's like very mechanical. It's not human the way that live music making is, and so I've always found it a little bit difficult to put together, even though I know it's a skill that musicians need to develop, and I do practice regularly with a metronome. So anyway, all of that to say, I find it very challenging to record with a metronome and without having another player to kind of play off of and listen for what they're doing. So, but this is the good news is this is also a skill. Playing, in this kind of a context with a steady tempo is a skill that I think can be developed over time as well. And in fact, I did get better at it as I continued doing some of these recordings. So that's something else I will continue to work on. Okay. I see we're missing a page here. Okay, I believe that the next thing that I wanted to share with you is on a different page. So I'm actually going to go and get my sheet music for it, and I can put it under the projector for you. I must have used a different PDF for that. Okay, so I'll play my recording of this duet number 4 called Melody. Very creative name. Okay. Not bad. I mean, I'm pretty pleased with this again for, a first session of recording. Things that I noticed to work on, again, some tempo issues. And then here in particular, I noticed number one, the E's down here are out of tune. This is a sixth below the C. That interval was kind of funky, not quite right. That's it. That's an issue that practicing with a tuner will help. And another thing that I noticed is at the very end of the recording, the upper part and the lower part cut off at different times. And that's something that I need to just plan a little bit better and count a little bit better in my head. Technically, both of these notes should cut off at the start of beat 4 of this measure. So that's just something I'll need to kind of psychologically work on. All right. Now I have a couple of takes of let's see, I can go ahead and close this. A couple of takes of this melody number 6 that I'll share with you. So by this time, I had recorded a lot actually that I'm not sharing because it's not as good as this. But by this time, I was kind of tired, so you can hear I kind of cracked somewhere in here. Um, a couple of timing issues, but timing was getting a little bit better than it was, I think, on the earlier recordings in general. And in this one, intonation, this time through, intonation struck me as a particular problem, and that is something that I noticed as I was, playing it back to myself while I was recording. So in particular, when you get the same interval, the C to the E, I noticed the E being out of tune with it, especially on these long held notes like here and here is another example of that interval that I thought was out of tune. So I did a second take, and I really tried. In between, I practiced with a tuner, and I tried to make it better. So that time through, the tuning was much better. That was a huge improvement. However, I think I was focused so much on the tuning that the timing got off more that time. So it's just all of these things to kind of process and work on, and you have to do everything right at the same time. So that's if I can combine the good things about that recording with the good things about the first recording of that same tune, then I think I will have a presentable record. Well, I mean, it's presentable. I'm presenting it to you guys, but a recording that I would be comfortable like putting on a CD or something if I were making a CD of this stuff. Not that anyone would necessarily want to buy a CD of Arben's trumpet duets, but you know what I mean. Um, if I were able to do that, then it would be like a recording that would meet my standards for myself. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, the last thing that I tried during this first recording session was to play some of these. So this is 12 concert pieces by Vaclav Nelibel. And these are trios, so they're for 3 parts. I don't think it actually specifies they're for trumpets. It says it's conceived for brass instruments, however, it may also be performed by clarinets, saxophones, or violins, but I'm playing them on trumpet. And I tried doing the first one of these. It's a little bit harder. It's fast and rhythmically challenging, rhythmically complicated. So that's going to take a little bit more work to record. But I was able to get a decent take of the second piece, which is a slow chorale type melody. These are a set of pieces, by the way, that I also learned while I was studying trumpet with Anita Serba, my teacher through middle and high school. And I didn't realize it at the time because I didn't have the grasp and the understanding of music theory that I do now. But I think in some of these, at least in the second one, he's really Vaclav Nelibel is going for a like medieval type sound. There's a lot of things in here like parallel fourths. I noticed a lot of the sounds when all the instruments come to a rest together. Like here, this sonority is just an open fifth, E B E, open fifth at the end, E B E. That kind of hollow sound that comes from that. It's not a major or a minor chord. That is something that was standard in Western music until, gosh, when did that change? It was probably about 1600. Okay, I'm getting into too much music theory here. To back up a little bit and just have a takeaway from all that, listen for these kind of open sounds. Ba, ba, ba. I don't know if those are the right notes or not, but that kind of hollow sound that doesn't sound either like a major chord or a minor chord, but just kind of a steady, stable sonority. All right, I'll play this recording as well. Okay, so by that time I was bleh, my lips were falling off. So you can hear a lot of intonation issues. The timing was pretty good on that one. But for example, there's a ton of vibrato. I used a ton of vibrato on this E because I was having a hard time, playing that by this point, and I wanted to be in tune. So when you can't play in tune, you can put a lot of vibrato on it because the pitch is quavering so much. Maybe the listener, maybe you can get away with it and the listener won't notice it being out of tune, but in reality it was out of tune. So this is one that I want to record again sometime when I'm fresh. And that's a great segue into talking just a little bit about what my plans are for, this project broadly construed going forward. So the capabilities of this software that I've been working with, Cakewalk, are very, very powerful. I can already see that. And I have so many ideas for creative things that I want to do with recording and with digital instruments and utilizing this technology. Much of it is beyond my current level of knowledge. So this is going to be a long-term learning process for me. I want to make recordings uh, because I think that making a traditional composition is a good thing, and I've done a lot of that, and I have several of those. I have the sheet music for them, the musical scores, and I mean, that's fine, but unless you can find performers who are willing and able to perform them, you know, that's not really a format, that sheet music format, that is going to allow a lot of people to interact with my creative work. If I make recordings, I can share them with people a lot easier than if I just have the sheet music. Like I have kind of started to share, what I've done initially with you guys in this video. It just seems to me that nowadays having a good working knowledge of recording technology is pretty much essential to someone who wants to do musical work that actually is accessible to most people. Um, because, the ability to read music and, look at a piece of music and kind of hear in your head how it's going to sound is not something, or be able to, sit down at the piano and play it out. Those are not skills that are as widespread in our culture nowadays as they used to be. And the average person you meet on the street probably isn't going to have that ability. Even if they have that ability, they may not have the time to sit down and work it out like that. because it's a time-consuming, labor-intensive process compared to just listening to a recording. So that's sort of my thought process behind wanting to do that. In addition to the fact that I've just been like craving a creative challenge for a long time. It's been a long time, I feel like, since I've had a genuine kind of artistic and musical challenge. I've had a lot of academic challenge since I started my program at Duke, but I haven't had the kind of creative stimulation, I think, especially since I finished coursework where I was taking some composition courses. In the past few years, since I've been, all the dissertation, I guess that's been like 2 years at this point. 2 years ago, I passed my preliminary exam. I really have been kind of craving a creative outlet. So this new recording technology, it's an area of music that I have pretty much zero prior experience before undertaking this project. I've worked, like I said, a little bit with Audacity, but nothing anywhere near as sophisticated as this Cakewalk program. So I'm really looking forward to the challenge of learning something new, doing creative things with it. I want to learn additional instruments. So as you saw in this first recording session, um, I felt like it would make the most sense to start with something, that I knew already very intimately, the trumpet, and work on applying that to this new technological medium. And I definitely want to keep doing that. But I've already purchased another new instrument to start learning and working with. It's called the flutophone. I'll show it to you in my next video. And I've already done a recording session with it as well. So I'll show you some of the results of that. And gradually, as I keep working with the software and working with new instruments, I hope that I'll be able to acquire some of those skills that'll help me, I guess, realize some of my creative concepts that I have. Because as I've studied music history, studied music theory, there have been all these ideas about how to, all of these things that I've learned how to kind of combine them together and recombine them in interesting ways, that maybe people haven't thought of before or haven't done so often. Um, so I have a lot that I hope to be able to share with you all about that in the coming months and years. It's going to be a very long-term process. So if I keep this up, I expect to be posting videos for quite a while, and glad to have y'all along for as much of the ride as you want to follow along. Um, and so thank you for watching, and I'm excited to dig further and further into this new kind of creative avenue that I found just recently. Take care. Bye bye.